Hello, hello. Today we are going to be discussing two books by Goethe that I finished reading. That being Elective Affinities here, and also The Sorrows of Young Werther here. Which, to be honest, this is a terrible cover. I do not like the way they designed that. Anyways, we'll talk about Elective Affinities first. So, Elective Affinities, it's kind of an odd title. It refers to kind of a literary device that he's using to kind of structure the plot. So, actually, you know what? I'll get into it a bit later after I've explained the plot. So, basically what we have here is we have two rich aristocrats. We have Charlotte, who is married to Edward, and they are living on this big estate, and their favorite pastime is to kind of like renovate or like beautify their grounds. So like they plant flowers and trees and they kind of like put a house on the hill or like make a lake here. So they're just engaging in sort of rich people activities, I guess. Anyways, they're both their second marriage. So they both had married somebody before. I think one of their spouses died. Everyone's got divorced, and now they're able to marry. And they were like kind of childhood friends. So their love is not really driven by passion, but more so familiarity. Anyways, they have a very status quo, boring, flat life. Just very, cruising. Everything's good. Now, one of Edward's friends, named the Captain, he is looking for a place to stay. And so he's like, well, why can't the captain stay with us? Charlotte kind of expresses some hesitancy, but in the end, they allow it. Under the context that Charlotte's niece, Audley, also has a place to stay. So instead of just the guy getting his friend to stay, Charlotte also gets her niece to stay. So it's like we both have somebody coming into the house. And then, funnily enough, Charlotte starts developing feelings for the captain, and Edward starts developing feelings for her younger niece, Audley. And so this kind of grows, and they kind of don't address it. They kind of just let it fester. And eventually, what triggers it? Edward goes to sleep with Charlotte, and they're both kind of fantasizing that they're with a different person. And then eventually they do address it. They're like, okay, this has to end. So Charlotte renounces her love for the captain, not after they've kissed though. And so the captain leaves, and then Charlotte's like, well, okay, like we got to get rid of Audley. Like she's got to go back to university or whatever. And Edward's like, no, that's not good for her. Let her stay here. I'll leave. So Edward leaves. He's kind of like distraught emotionally. He loves Audley and he can't get over it. So he's like, I'm going to enroll myself in the military. If I die, it's not meant to be. If I live, I can marry her. Like that's a sign. So he goes to like fight in the army. And while he's there, Charlotte realizes that she's pregnant with Edward's kid. And then she names it Otto, which is supposed to be like a reference to both of their affairs, which doesn't make sense, right? Because Audley, that makes sense, right? Audley. But what the captain, how does that relate to Otto? But my translation just left out the fact that he's named Captain Otto. So in the original, his name's Captain Otto, which the kid's name Otto makes sense, right? Anyways, and then later, of course, the kid is born, and it looks like a combination of the captain and Audley. Again, referring to the double affair. Anyways, then Edward kind of comes back from the war. He survives. So he's like, okay, my love is legit. And so it's going to happen. How do we make it happen? Well, of course, we have to get a divorce. So he talks to, I think it's the captain who's back at that point, and he's like, well, let's talk about this divorce. Now, Charlotte's hoping that Edward will come back to her because she's had this baby. And so now this baby can bring them together, and they can hit the reset button, go back to the way things were. Edward does not see it that way. He kind of loves Audley, and he's not willing to give that up. So then Edward kind of comes back to see the estate, and he sees Audley by accident, and she's right there. So they kind of have the secret meeting. They have a big hug. They're like, okay, we're going to get a divorce, and then we're going to, go live together. And so he leaves, and then Audley has been watching the kid for Charlotte, because Audley is kind of like the the top housekeeper. Like, she's like just very good at her job, so she always is taking care of stuff. So it's very normal. So she has the kid with her. It's getting dark because she talked with Edward for too long. So Audley's going to head back with the kid. She doesn't want to walk all the way around the lake, so she'll take the boat. She takes the boat all the time, but she's a little bit too emotional because she's about to swoon because she just talked with Edward. So she jumps into the boat, but she's got the oar in one hand, baby, and a book, and she kind of slips into the boat and drops everything, and everything goes flying. So she's able to like grab the kid's like wrapping or like shirt, but she falls in the boat, so she's kind of like pinned with her arm like over the edge, and so she's trying to get up, but she's not very strong. She can't get up. So eventually she manages to she doesn't want to let go of the kid, so she manages to get up, but the kid's head was in the water the whole time, and it stopped breathing. So the kid is dead, and she's like going crazy, right? Because obviously she just killed a baby. Now, I read some summaries online, and the summaries made it seem like it was intentional. But I promise you, in the book version, it is not intentional. It is clear that it was an accident, which I think is more consistent. Now, you might argue that subconsciously it was on purpose to remove the barrier between her and Edward getting the divorce, right? But in the book, it makes it clear that at least on a conscious level, it is an accident. So anyways, she kind of runs back to the house with the baby. They try to revive it. They cannot. Then Charlotte kind of agrees to the divorce. She's like, okay, well, you guys love each other. We'll get divorced. Let's make it happen. You and Audley and Edward, you can go live together. But Audley, all of a sudden, when the moment is right, they can go finally have their fantasy life. She says no. She cannot forgive herself for the death of the child, and so she just like stays in her room, stops eating, and she just dies of starvation because she just is so guilt-ridden over the death of the child. And then Edward, who loves Audley so much, cannot bear to see her in this state of dying. He dies shortly afterwards of heartbreak. And so then the captain and Charlotte are kind of left to party it out. They can't really party it out after that. Now, of course, I left a lot of stuff out. A lot of other things happen in there, but that's kind of the gist of the plot. So the idea of elective affinities is that it's like this chemical theory that if two chemicals are bonded to each other, but you mix them, they'll swap in order to like get to like a more, I guess we would call it lower energy state. Now, I'm not sure they had like the theory of thermodynamics in chemistry back then when he wrote it. But I guess they would just think it has like a higher affinity. So they would swap. Like it's like a double displacement reaction if you know chemistry. That's kind of a nerd moment for me, but anyways. So of course the chemical reaction kind of mirrors the plot in the sense that, well, Edward is with Charlotte and then Audley and the captain are kind of switching, right? Now, there's been some commentary on whether or not Goethe is trying to say that, well, just like chemicals, there's no free will involved, it's just fate, right? There's just chemical reaction forces at work, and the chemicals have no say whether or not they switch. In a similar fashion, does Edward and Audley or Edward and Charlotte really even have free will in this case, or are they simply obeying their subconscious or the laws of nature? So there's a bit of a free will undertone there as well. I don't want to like crap on Goethe that much because like it's good. It's just not my favorite. Like I read Faust this year. I read The Man of 50. I read Sorrows of Young Werther, and I read Elective Affinities. So I read 4 of Goethe's works this year, and they're good, but they're just not my favorite. I don't know just if it's the translation that's the issue, or the writing style, or if it's just something about Germans. Not sure. Anyways, yeah, they're good, but maybe a 3 out of 5 star. Now, let's talk about The Sorrows of Young Werther with the terrible designed cover. Now, this one, not a lot happens plot-wise. The format of this one is that Werther is writing a series of letters to his friend Wilhelm. Now, Wilhelm is just a passive observer. He doesn't do anything in the book. But we only have Werther's letters. We don't have Wilhelm's responses. So it's just Werther's kind of letters to Wilhelm the whole time. Basically, he meets this girl at this dance in his town. He falls in love with her. She's like the greatest girl ever. Like, pretty, nice. I don't know what else. He just loves her. Anyways, he runs into a problem because he realizes soon afterwards that she is engaged to a guy 11 years her senior named Albert. And Albert, sorry, the girl's name I think is also Charlotte. I just read this, I should know. But he calls her Lotte, not Charlotte, but I think Lotte is short for Charlotte. Anyways, yeah, I wonder if Goethe met a Charlotte in real life, because that's 2 books now with Charlotte. Anyways, yeah, so Werther's in love with Charlotte. Charlotte's engaged to Albert, and Albert's kind of a boring dude, just very stoic, doesn't really say too much, kind of reserved guy, very consistent and dependable. Where Werther's the opposite. He's like a poet, an artist. He's very passionate, has very high highs and low lows, and so Charlotte has this interesting choice between the artist and the businessman, kind of. And so, whose fault really is this love triangle? I thought about that, and everybody kind of has a slice in the pie. Now, I think Werther's is probably the biggest. Okay, don't continue to fall in love with a girl who's engaged. That's on you. Maybe he thought he was cavalier and could take her from him. I mean, clearly he thought that. Now, Charlotte also has a pretty big piece of the pie, because you should not be entertaining a suitor if you're engaged. Sorry. Now, she really, really, really hopes that he's just a brother. But let's be honest. You know, he expressed his love many times. You know exactly what's going on. And so, instead of just hoping that one day his love will be sublimated to somebody else and he'll just be a brother to you, you should have cut it off sooner. So, it's partly your fault, too. And it's maybe a tiny bit Albert's fault. He maybe should have been more assertive to, like, kick Werther out of the house. He's kind of maybe not as... a little more spineless than he should have been, but, I mean, not really his fault as much. But, yeah, like, Charlotte and Werther, it takes 2 to tangle, right? You guys should have fixed that ahead of time. Anyways, yeah, not much happens. He kind of is going crazier and crazier. Like, we see his descent into madness as he's kind of just letting this love for this engaged girl fester. Obviously it's a forbidden taboo love. It cannot be. She's engaged. She actually gets married to Albert like halfway through the book. That does not stop Werther at all. He's as more in love with her than ever. And he tries to stay away for a bit. He moves somewhere else. It doesn't work out. He ends up moving back to the same town. Big mistake, buddy. Why'd you move back? Anyways, then there's this murder in the town, and it's some guy he talked to before, and it's this guy that loved this lady who also was married. So it's kind of like a mini example foreshadowing situation compared to what Werther's in. And the guy killed the husband so he could have access to the wife, but of course he's caught immediately. So Werther is like, bro, that could be me. So he's like thinking about how, well, one of us in the love triangle's got to go. It's got to be me or Albert. But at this point, they're married already. Like, bro, just go somewhere else. Plenty of fish in the sea. But he can't see it. He's all eyes on Charlotte. He just thinks about her 24/7. So even if they were to get married, Charlotte and Werther, I don't even sure if it'd be a healthy love. It'd be obsessive. Like, Werther is just, he's off the rails. He's really off the rails. So yeah, eventually he's faced with a choice. What can he do? He doesn't choose the sensible thing and try to move away again. Instead, he asks for Albert's pistols, says, I'm going on a journey. And, oh, I should say one more thing, sorry, before that happens. He goes to see Charlotte for one last visit before he leaves. And he reads her out loud this, like, passage. And it's like, they both get really emotional. And then he, like, kisses her, and she's like, what are you doing? And, like, she runs away. Now, she clearly has feelings for him as well, but she's more sensible than him, and she senses her duty to her husband, and so she locks herself in another room. Good for her, I guess. I mean, that was the one time she pushed him away, which is, I guess that's good. But yeah, then he's like, I'm sorry, and he leaves. Then he asks for the pistols. She realizes what's going to happen, but doesn't stop her husband in sending them. So the servant, the servant picks the pistols up from them, and yeah, she doesn't stop him. And he shoots himself in the head and dies, and then no one goes to his funeral. No clergy, and Albert and Charlotte don't go. And that's the end. So, yeah, super fun. I mean, 2 tragedies from Goethe at once. I don't know if the Germans don't like writing happy stories or what, but that's it. So, I mean, there's a valuable lesson to be learned in that book, which is that don't entertain love interests that can't be, because sooner or later you will be put in a situation where you're too far gone. So you have to be very careful in matters of love. One more interesting anecdote is that Sorrow's a Young Werther, I mentioned this before, is one of the books that Frankenstein's monster had in the leather satchel that he found. He found Plutarch's Lives, Milton's Paradise Lost, and Sorrow's a Young Werther. And I think it's that book that messed up Frankenstein's monster. It's that's the bad book, because he kind of saw that instead of learning what I just said that you should learn from the book, like be careful, he kind of identified with Werther and saw that, well, Werther's rejected by the people that love him, and Frankenstein's monster is like, well, I'm also rejected by the people that I love, like those people in the cabin. I don't know, it's been a while since I read it, like a year. And so he decides to get violent with it. So yeah, be careful what you read too, I guess, especially if you're a recluse and have no friends. Anyways, yeah, that's Goethe. 2 good books, 3 out of 5 stars for both of those, I think. And I'm done with Goethe for now. No more German literature for a bit. What am I going to read next? Great question, thanks for asking. Well, I'm still reading Brothers K. I've got some poetry books I want to finish for the end of the year. And then I'm going to maybe read King Lear, some Philip Dick, some Christmas stuff. We'll see what I can get done in the next 3 weeks here. So, yeah, thanks for watching. See you later.